Good evening. Call to order City Council meeting for the City of North Bend, January 19th, 2021 by virtual meeting. Will the clerk please confirm the roll?
Mayor, everybody's present except Councilmember Elwood.
Thank you.
I think he says he's dialed in, so he may be calling user number 1.
Well, he'll have to unmute and tell us if he is. In the meantime, we'll move forward. First item on tonight's agenda is the consent agenda. It has 5 items. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second, I have a motion by member Godhealth, second by member Miller. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. It's unanimous. Citizens' comments. This is the time in the evening when we will take citizen comments on items not on the agenda. If you would like to speak on an item not on the agenda, please indicate so in the chat box or *9. Looking for a conference. Thank you, clerk. If you are on the phone.
Michael Thomas, please unmute yourself, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, City Council and public who may wish to listen to this.
Michael, would you, I know you've done it so many times, we know you, but in addition to your name, address, please, and I'll restart.
Sure, give me another couple seconds. Yeah,
Sure.
Mike Thomas, 1231 LaForest Drive, SE, North Bend. Happy New Year, Council. Wanted to relay some information in the event there are public listening. Today, the King County Council did not approve the North Bend water system plan as proposed. It was interesting to see Mr. McFarland attend, as well as Mike Kenyon in attendance. Mark Rigos was there, as well as many others. I remain very concerned about the city's water system plan, and I have spoken over the past 4 years to you on this topic, and I continue to be snubbed and rebuffed by city officials and several items, and I am very concerned about my treatment as a citizen and obstruction that I have experienced over the past several years. But that is quite different. Now I'm seeing, looking at the comments, this is very significant. Both the Snoqualmie and Tulalip tribes wrote in comments on the city's water system plan and have many of the same concerns that myself and others have been expressing. The Tulalip sent their technical representative who has worked on your mitigation strategy since the mid-2000s. That is very relevant. They sent their representative. They're very concerned, as I am. And as I even look at your late responses in changing the water system plan as late as December of this year, and there are even claims that you're continuing to revise it as of January, there are grave concerns. When I look at your mitigation water, what's remaining from Cascade Well, 0.06 cubic feet. That is the amount to a hose left open. And you're claiming that you can support 1,000 more units of development on that. That is ridiculous. Furthermore, there are just many more concerns. You have nothing to show. For more than 14 years of planning, you have no mitigation sources realized. You have not managed your water loss. You have not acted quickly on metering issues, and you have cost us money. And it's very important that this come to light in the context of your water system plan. I hope it gets more review. I really do. One area, though, that I'm also very interested is, it was actually interesting to see the criminal charges filed against the ex-governor of Minnesota, primarily for negligence in relation to water. I think that's something very telling. Now, I don't feel that North Bend is of the same class as lead poisoning, but I see many parallels to it where there's been not a neglect in management of water system planning. And I really hope you listen to that. Thank you very much for your comments. Have a nice evening.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else? You're muted, Don.
There is a call-in user 1 guest, and I'm not sure who that is, but they have their hand raised.
I believe that's Brendan. Brendan, can you unmute?
I
So can you guys hear me now?
Yes,
Can you guys hear me now?
yes.
So my phone is telling me I'm unmuted, but I raised my hand in the call because I'm dialing in. I can't get in via web. So apologies for the confusion. But this is me, Brendan.
Thanks.
Glad we
Okay.
clarified that.
Well, let the clerk show that Member Elwood has been with the meeting then. Okay, seeing no one else,
No.
right? Yep, I think we had just had Mr. Thomas. Okay. Moving on, commission and committee reports. Council members, gonna do things a little bit differently tonight. Following the regular committee reports and the report from the city administrator on the commissions, I'm going to invite any of you who are serving on a regional committee as a liaison, if there's anything from those regional committees that you wanted to share with us tonight. And of course, we always hear from Council Member Gotthealth on Eastside Fire and Rescue, so we'll start with that. But I'll, mention some of the others, such as the emergency management, the watershed forum, SVGA, Sound Cities. We've got a lot of different regional liaisons out there, and it occurred to Pro Tem Garcia and I, as we discussed that we never make time for you to tell us what's going on. So we'll start that tradition here tonight. First, Ms. Miller, would you care to tell us about Community and Economic Development Committee?
I certainly would, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much for the time. At today's CED meeting, we discussed international building and fire codes. That will come before council on our February 2nd, 2021 meeting.
Thank you. Anything else?
Nope, that's good. That's
Okay.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Finance and Administration, Mr. Gotthealth.
Yes, the Finance and Administration met on January 12th, had a Microsoft Teams virtual meeting. We discussed the IT services contract, which I think was on the consent agenda tonight. And then we had an executive session to discuss the performance of a public employee. And that's all we had at that agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Cullen, Public Health and Safety. You're muted.
Public Health and Safety, we had our last meeting on January 12th. We had an update from Chief Phipps in regards to the SCORE contract amendment. That stands for South Correction Entity and is agreement about inmate housing. There will be no cost increase for 2021 and 2022 remains to be seen. We talked about outdoor seating requirements for outdoor dining in our restaurants in regards to COVID-19 restrictions. We had a police update from Captain Almquist. They will be getting a simulator for the force for training and de-escalating techniques. And we had an update from Chief Clark. EFR is planning on being part of the COVID-19 vaccination process for the East Side. I also would like to give you an update on Sound City Association that I was in a meeting today. They mostly said the COVID-19 numbers are going in the right direction and we've survived another peak, and they wanted to thank everybody for their role in that. Mask wearing, social distancing, and limiting gatherings is working. Governor Jay Inslee announced opening vaccines to the 1B group. These people are age 65 or older and multi-generational households for people over the age of 50 caring for elders. If you want to find out when it's your turn to get a vaccine and where, please check out the Phase Finder. But keep in mind, the site has been crashing because the website has been so heavily used. They're working on it. And they wanted you to know 70% of doctors and RNs have been vaccinated in King County to date. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great report. Let's see, Mr. Garcia, Mayor Pro Tem. Anything you wanted to share?
Yeah, well, amazingly enough, after today, it feels like I've been doing this for about 4 years, but we have our first meeting. Our first work study is actually going to be somewhat of a retreat. It's going to be next Tuesday, the 26th at 7 p.m. via the lovely Zoom app. Appreciate everybody's quick response and look forward to hammering those things out. And I want to make sure that we don't skip over the TPW with Mr. Laudenbach.
Yes, thank you. And Transportation and Public Works, Member Laudenbach.
Thank you, Your Honor. Transportation and Public Works hasn't met yet, but we'll meet on the 26th at 4 p.m. via Zoom.
Thank you very much.
One last thing, Your Honor. I would like to say that I was extremely impressed by the new chairwomen, chairpersons, Public Health and Safety and CED. They've done a fine job, and welcome to the club.
Yes, good job. I was on both of those meetings. Dave, commission report, please.
Did we miss Eastside Fire and Rescue?
I'm coming back to you.
Okay.
These reports have traditionally been done by our celebrated Community and Economic Development Director. So Rebecca, you're on.
Thank you. The Planning Commission last met on December 10th. At that meeting, staff provided an informal introduction to the idea of form-based codes to adopt for the area of the downtown commercial zone. Planning Commission's next meeting will be January 28th, and we are having a work study covering the draft form-based codes for our downtown zone in preparation for the following meeting, which would have the introduction public hearing. The Parks Commission last met November 18th and discussed with staff Meadowbrook Prairie Loop Trail project, which was not awarded grant funding from North Bend, Snoqualmie, and Skyview Metropolitan Park District's joint application for a Washington Wildlife and Conservation grant. As such, staff proposed to apply for a land and water conservation grant this year with the same partners for the project. So we will be looking for council authorization to do so. The Park Commission provided a recommendation to retain the city's 2020 share of the King County's park levy, which was reserved as a match for the 2020 grant for use as a match towards the 2021 application for the project. The Parks Commission also discussed the potential for a mural at the clarifier tank at the wastewater treatment plant as a volunteer project to be coordinated by Deborah Landers. The Park Commission will next meet on January 27th, and we will review the draft 2020 report of accomplishments to present to council and the draft 2021 Parks Work Program. The Parks Commission will also hear more from Deborah Landers regarding the preliminary planning for considering the mural art at the wastewater treatment plant. The Economic Development Commission last met November 17th and discussed what the city was doing or can do for businesses during the current operating restrictions. They discussed the Discover North Bend website updates, marketing tools, and other connection opportunities. The Economic Development Commission also discussed the Economic Development Plan, goals, concept, and vision. And the next meeting, January 26th, we will continue to have discussions regarding the Economic Development Plan and any COVID-19 business updates. For the first time in several months, the EDC is finally at a full 5 members. And once the goals and vision statement for the Economic Development Plan are solidified, the committee will explore economic issues and opportunities, develop policies that address the goals, and finally strategies that will be recommended actions to be taken. The final product plan will likely be a simple and graphical version for the public and maybe a more detailed technical paper to help inform future decision makers. That's all I have.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Great report. All right, as I mentioned at the start of this, we're going to also then invite others, and we'll start off, of course, with Mr. Godhealth, regular Eastside Fire and Rescue report.
Right. Thank you very much. So Eastside Fire and Rescue met January 14th. We had a virtual meeting in Zoom too. We discussed basically what's going on with the PFAS. We talked about COVID-19 and a couple of the interesting numbers that came out. We have 50% of our first responders have volunteered and have taken the vaccine at this point. Another tidbit of notice was the goal was to do 1.6 million. Our goal is to do 1.6 million COVID vaccines, I think, in the next 6 months. That would take 14,000 a day. We're nowhere near that. So that was one of the discussions, which would then move me into talk about what we're doing and what we're trying to do. Seattle has already got approved. The Seattle Fire Department has already got approved to be able to start to deliver vaccines into senior center homes and stuff within Seattle. That will be the first level of what East Side Fire and Rescue is going to try to be able to do. And what they're doing right now is shadowing Seattle in order to put this together. Our hope is within the next couple of weeks that we get approved to be able to go out to local nursing homes and to get those vaccinated. And then very shortly after that, the goal would be to try to find some sites local here that we would be able to provide the vaccines to. So we're making progress on trying to get that accomplished. I know that we as a city have volunteered the city hall. I know there's some conversation I brought up, not only to talk about vaccinating our public, but I know that there's a lot of at-risk seniors that aren't at nursing homes that the senior center provides meals to directly, and we are going to try to see if we can get some of that taken care of too and safely for them. So there's some things coming down the line. Basically, like I said, we're hoping that we'll be delegated by King County to be able to provide those in our community at a short time.
Thank you.
The last thing you also want to talk to is I also was part of an EMAC meeting. The EMAC meeting has been focused on how to move forward with our Zone 1 coordinators. Mark Rigos might be aware of these individuals. One of the individuals worked with us very much in our emergencies as we move forward, and King County is trying to change the way that they're managed and how they're funded and involvement. So from the EMAC, we're providing additional input into making sure that small local jurisdictions alike get the same sort of support that we've been getting if it gets moved out to a different location.
Great. Thank you very much. Any other council members want to take the opportunity for a regional liaison report? Mr. Laudenbach.
Thank you. To piggyback on what Alan just said, we at the SCA also talked about the emergency management coordinators, the desire by the county to make them full-time employees rather than independent contractors. And the concern there is that these emergency management coordinators would then be given duties by the county that would not relate to actually aiding the outlying communities that they're currently serving. And this is a unified front asking the county to reconsider that particular position. The other topics that we covered in the last SCA meeting, which was 2 weeks ago, basically we talked about orientation for new members sitting on committees and commissions that were assigned through the PIC nominating committee. And we also talked about one of the pressing issues, which is the county is now currently in Olympia lobbying for the ability to purchase existing hotels, nursing homes, and other care facilities to house homeless individuals with the recently passed 0.1% sales tax levy. And they're going to be bonding against future revenues in order to purchase properties immediately. The concern among many communities is that the county will not be a responsive partner to ILAs and making sure that the facilities meet with the approval and location approval of the various individual entities. So that's a big concern, and a lot of communities have taken up the cause and are changing their zoning requirements in order to be able to ensure that there is communication and approval from host communities for new facilities. North Bend is, I believe, considering such a thing, and I look forward to supporting that as it comes forward. That's it, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Mr. Elwood.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Sorry, I'm using two different technologies, phone and spotty web. So if my mouse is different from what you hear, I apologize. So I'll report on the SVGA meeting. I was not able to attend the last one, which was on November 18th at 7 o'clock via Teams. Some of the discussion items were disaster preparedness, SVGA legislative agenda, and then local governments shared their things that were happening in their community. The next meeting is set for January 27th this year, again at 7 o'clock. So that's all I have to report. And we're still working on the agenda. So there's nothing I can say on that part. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Garcia.
Your Honor, the Watershed Forum meeting is tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. via the Zoom. I think I'll mention this because somehow I think I'm going to be the chair of that and Mayor Pro Tem at the same time. And since this is a year that I'm up for election, I think it might be a good idea to have somebody start to attend as an alternate to kind of get a feel of the land. So somebody people might want to think about that. It's every other Wednesday for a couple hours, every other month on a Wednesday for a couple hours. So if it's something you're interested, reach out and talk to me about it.
And say every other Wednesday, you're probably scared about everybody away.
That's every other month on a Wednesday.
Every other month. Thank you. Anyone else? Not seeing any hands or hearing anything, we'll move on. Thank you for indulging kind of the no notice attempt there, Council. I do think it's a positive thing and something that, again, will help keep the public informed of just how much else you do outside of these meetings. So appreciate that. With that, we will move on to item number 6. Which is AB 21-006, a motion authorizing contract with Port Madison for GIS services. Mr. Rigos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Council. It's a pretty straightforward agenda bill tonight. Just has to do with kind of the gap we have right now in GIS services. Our GIS coordinator ended work at the end of 2020, so we're in a bit of a hole, but we've jumped on this pretty quickly, and there's 3 benefits of moving forward with this short-time GIS support. First benefit is it fulfills the GIS needs that we have on a weekly basis. Number 2, it provides an outside opinion and recommendations, technical recommendations on our GIS system moving forward. We'll have this person with a lot of knowledge and skills that can support us as we move to more of a permanent replacement here soon. And then the third benefit is this person will probably be networked with other GIS people in the area. So he may know somebody, he or a she, that might be interested in this permanent position. So it's a pretty small dollar amount. Right now, we're saving a little bit of money because we're not paying a GIS person, but we would like to have this short-term support soon. So that ends my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Council, before we move to any public comment, when I ask if there's any clarifying questions, I know that this one did not reach a committee due to timing. And we'll deal with that momentarily. Any clarifying questions for Mr. Rios? Seeing none, if you are a member of the public and wish to speak on this item, please indicate in the chat box or *9 if you are dialed in. Don, would you confirm we have no one? Okay, didn't think so. With that, let's see, GIS support. That kind of bridges all of the main functions of our operations here. Let's, since Mr. Rigos introduced it, and he is generally a lead on transportation and public works, we have Council Member, is it Miller, who is chair of TPW at this time. Would you want to introduce the motion? You need to unmute.
I'm the chair of Transportation Public Works, Your Honor.
I'm sorry. Well, Mr. Loudenback, go for it.
I'm sure Ms. Miller is more than capable of making the motion once she's unmuted. A motion to approve AB 21-4006, authorizing a contract with Port Madison GIS Incorporated for temporary GIS support in a form and content acceptable to Mr. Kenyon, the city attorney, in an amount not to exceed $20,000.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
That'd be me.
I have a second by Ms. Miller. Yeah, got to adjust to new committee chairs for the new year. Thank you. Discussion. Mr. Loudenback, did you want to speak to it?
GIS is a very important function, and obviously we've had a transition in our in-house GIS, so I would recommend a do pass as it's an essential function.
Thank you. Ms. Miller, did you have anything to add?
I also agree with Ross there, and also on a personal and workability level, Steve has been absolutely fantastic. So I've appreciated the time.
Thank you. Any other member wish to speak on this item? Mr. Garcia.
I guess I'm sorry, this didn't register, but how come it didn't go through a committee?
Mr. Rodriguez.
Yeah, Chris, we learned about this on January 1st. And by the time I prepared an agenda bill, by the time I reached out to 5 or 6 other consultants that might be interested in performing this service, this agenda bill was just written about a week ago. So really no time for committees unless we pushed it to TPW January 26th, and then it wouldn't get to council till February 2nd. So that would have put us behind the 8 ball 2 or 3 weeks. So that's why it didn't go to a committee, just timing.
Always council's choice to remand if they're concerned with that. Anyone else? Alan, did I see your hand up?
Yeah. My only concern is, when was this packet done? And we had a CD, at least a couple of meetings in between there, either TPW or, who was CDW today. Why weren't we able to get it through them?
So TPW is next Tuesday, the 26th. CED was today. This agenda bill was written about January 12th or 13th. And we had some power problems, you probably recall last week, Alan. So this is really a TPW function. So, but again, it's pretty short and simple here. Just looking for your approval tonight.
Anyone else? We do acknowledge it's unusual to have not made it to a committee. Okay. Seeing no other input, the motion before you is to approve AB 21-006, authorizing a contract with Port Madison GIS Inc. for temporary GIS support in a form and content acceptable to the city attorney in an amount not to exceed $20,000. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries. It is unanimous. Thank you very much for that. Readjust here. The next item on our agenda, item number 7, AB 21-007, resolution ratifying proclamation of emergency. This is Mr. Miller, but I will note that I took this action last week during the power outage when we were getting notified that we might be down for an extended period of time. The emergency has since been lifted. Mr. Miller, you might want to explain it in more detail, but I wanted council to hear from me on that.
Thank you, Your Honor. Council members, this is the typical process we go through when we experience an emergency that might require us to take some measures that are responsive immediately to the situation. And you'll find in your staff report, there are 3 items that we traditionally do: enter into contracts and incur obligations to combat such emergency situations, to protect the health and safety of persons and properties, provide appropriate emergency assistance to the victims of such disaster, and other emergency services and actions as appropriate. So on January 13th, 2021, the mayor did issue an emergency proclamation. And as the mayor stated, we were not aware at that time how long this emergency would last, or if we would have additional storms that would supplement it. So I think it was quick action to try to be in a position to help anybody who needed it. And this is required to come to the council for your ratification of the action. So we're looking tonight for you to do that.
Mr. Godhelp.
Question, basically point over, if nothing was done, is there a reason to ratify it? I mean, what does it buy us, and do we need to ratify? I guess trying to understand. It was originally designed because you thought it'd be a multi-day, situation. It did not. Is there a purpose to ratify it, and what happens if you don't? Purely question.
The purpose for ratification is to have the city council support the mayor's proclamation. It's a formality, but if you issue an emergency proclamation, that does need to come to the full body for their ratification. One cannot assume sort of a cavalier attitude as a mayor and go out and do these things without the support of city council. So we're just looking for you to confirm that this action was appropriate at the time.
And on top of that, Alan and council, I'd recommend ratification for the same reasons Dave said, but also it would not be uncommon for the state auditor during the annual audit to go through this, see the proclamation of emergency and want to find the ratification just to ensure that proper process was followed, even though apparently we didn't need to implement any of the provisions here.
Yeah. Again, it was introduced as a precaution. Thankfully, we did not find that we needed it. We did open the EOC, closed it the next day. Any other questions before we move to public comment? Seeing none, if there's anyone member of the public who wishes to speak on this item, please indicate in the chat box or *9 on your phone. Seeing and hearing none, we'll move on. Motion is, or the motion to approve the resolution is up. Perhaps Public Health and Services would be the appropriate committee.
I motion to approve AB 21-007, resolution ratifying proclamation of emergency.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Loudenback, motion by Ms. Colon. Discussion? Seeing none, the motion before you is to approve AB 21-007 resolution ratifying and confirming January 13th, 2021 proclamation of local emergency. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. It is unanimous. Thank you very much for that. Next item on our agenda, final regular item on the agenda, 8 is AB 21-008, an ordinance amending North Bend Municipal Code regarding medium density residential zones. Mr. McCarty.
Thank you, Your Honor. So this has been a lot of work bringing this through the process with the council and planning commission and staff. So I'm very happy to present it to you tonight. So this started out with a grant. The city of North Bend applied for and received a grant from the Department of Commerce to improve opportunities for the development of more affordable housing options. And the amendments that are before you tonight established a new medium density residential zone consistent with and which implement a part of that grant. The second part of that grant being the development of a form-based code, which staff and the planning commission are currently. So council is familiar with the overall purpose of this zone. What it is to bridge what's conventionally developed in single-family zoning and what's conventionally developed in multifamily zoning, characterized by smaller building sizes that are compatible with the overall form and character typical to a single-family neighborhood, but with a broader variety of building forms and typologies, which provide interest and diversity at sizes that are more affordable than conventional single-family or cottages. Staff introduced the concept of the MDR zone to council back on September 22nd at a work study for considering creating this zone with the existing cottage residential zone, as well as with 3 potential areas of the low density residential zone that are closest to the downtown. And the direction from council at that work study was just to look at the existing cottage residential zone. So staff presented council's direction to the planning commission when we introduced the amendments, but the planning commission wanted to also discuss the 3 areas of the low density residential zone that were presented to council for overall potential areas for including in the MDR zone. The planning commission held a public hearing on November 12th, considering all of the potential areas that were presented to council. And this included a new medium density residential 10 zone, allowing up to 10 units per acre, the same as the existing cottage residential zone, in all areas of the existing cottage residential zone, except for the properties fronting to Stilson Avenue within that zone, which would become a part of an MDR6 zone. So the second part of that would be that MDR6 zone, allowing up to 6 units per acre for those properties fronting Stilson, as well as 3 areas that are currently zoned low density residential surrounding the downtown. So after the hearing, the planning commission recommended approval of the proposed MDR zones as presented at the public hearing, subject to removal of one LDR zone that was previously considered for MDR6, which was across from Bartels. And that was in consideration of the comments that were received in the hearing and the context and constraints of that neighborhood. So following the planning commission's recommendation, staff provided some additional edits, which are shown in yellow highlight in the draft before you in the planning commission recommendation. Those additional edits follow from staff review, and those are intended just to provide greater flexibility regarding the required mix of housing types on larger development sites. The planning commission packet or planning commission recommendation is provided in your packet starting at page 53 and includes a map depicting the areas that are included in their recommendation. The planning commission recommendation with the staff edits was then brought to the CED committee on December 15th. And the CED committee did not want to recommend the planning commission recommendation and is instead recommending approval of the MDR zone only in the current cottage residential zone, not including those areas zoned LDR that the planning commission had considered as an MDR6 zone. Additionally, the committee is recommending that the entire new MDR zone, which is the current cottage residential zone, be approved at 10 units per acre, which is the same as the existing zone, rather than having an MDR6 zone for the properties fronting to Stilson Avenue. The CED committee's alternative recommendation is also within your packet, and that starts at page 81. So one final thing to note, the motion that's in the agenda bill before you is based on the planning commission recommendation. And that's just consistent with the format for bringing forth amendments for zoning map and development regulations from the planning commission. Council can amend that motion or can provide an alternative motion consistent with the CED's recommendation, or any other direction that you might provide. So with that, let me turn it back to council, and I'll be happy to address any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mike. Before we look for public comment on this item, clarifying questions from council. Mr. Rosen.
There we go. Actually, this one's for Mr. Kenyon, caught you off guard there. Clarifying question on this entire thing. If there was a grant that we've accepted, do we need to pass this ordinance tonight in order to fulfill the terms of the grant, or could we, if we rejected it or tabled it, will we be in jeopardy of having to repay the grant?
The answer is, it depends on the terms of the grant agreement itself, Jonathan, and I don't have that in front of me to be able to specifically answer it.
Okay.
Mike may know, or Dave, but if not, if they can send me the grant agreement in the morning, I can take a look at it then.
I can provide a response. And then also, I think Jesse Reynolds, who's on the call, has been more of our overall grant coordinator, but within our scope of work for that grant is bringing a resolution to the Department of Commerce showing council approval of the amendments.
And Mike, I can answer that question right now for Councilmember Rosen. If we do not pass the ordinance between now, it's June 30th. It was originally April 1st, but with COVID, it got pushed out quite a bit. We will not receive 30% of this portion of the funds. So it was a $50,000 grant. 40,000 is for the form-based codes, which are going to the Planning Commission next week. For the MDR grant, it was $10,000. And so for this specific motion in front of you tonight, you wouldn't get 30% of the $10,000.
Okay, so basic math, if I'm right here, if we choose not to follow through with this, we're gonna forfeit $3,000.
Yeah.
Okay, just want to understand the cost of these things. Thank you.
Mr. Garcia. Thought I saw your hand earlier.
Yeah, I guess now I'm wondering why we're doing it first and final tonight. But I feel like there's some flexibility there, so because the thing got extended to June, right?
That's correct. The grant deadline did get extended.
Okay.
Any further clarifications?
That
Okay. Hearing none, then I will ask if there's any member of the public wishing to speak on this item, indicate in the chat box or by *9, and we will call on you. You'll have 3 minutes.
Michael Thomas, please unmute yourself and you have 3 minutes.
Sure, thanks. Mike Thomas, 1231 LaForest Drive, SE. I'm surprised that we're continuing to increase residential density. This is now all MDR10 for what was cottage residential. With the exception of the actual cottage residential there, there are far fewer homes and large lots there. This isn't just, a rezone from six homes per acre to 10. The actual number of homes there is far below that. And I think you need to be very sensitive to things such as parking, traffic, access to parks, pedestrian traffic to nearby areas that are going to have some very negative impacts. Both Cedar Falls Way and North Bend Way are getting quite busy, and in fact, you're only allowed for traffic to enter along Cedar Falls Way at the 2 entrances. I think you need to reconsider that and consider for some entrances along North Bend Way. I would also remind the council that this is the last major stand of trees within the city. I propose that you rename Cedar Falls Way to Denuded Drive. This is a beautiful stand, and it's a shame to see it go. And there's only minimal tree protection. Many of the neighborhoods that are directly across from MDR10, like LaForest Home, Cedar Falls itself, and even some of the single-family residential homes on the other side, have gone to lengths to preserve those trees. And it's very sad to see that go. I would also remind of the environmental considerations in MDR 10. You are literally within hundreds of feet of NB3, which will be a CARA type 1. You're going to be disrupting groundwater in the area. I would also think that you might need to consider that you should not increase fill or raise the level to disrupt groundwater. You're in proximity to other neighborhoods that may be flooded. The city does not have a good track record in this area, as well as there continue to be the operation of septic systems along Cedar Falls Way in one community. So you need to think strongly about this. I would also like to see the buffers increased, the tree buffer to yet another 10 feet. I'd like to see at least 35 feet away from the road. I'd also like to see the buffers to be more consistent on the entrances with La Forest and Cedar Falls itself. I'm also concerned about really the lack of any new parks being added. There are no really official city parks. Yes, you're in proximity to Opstead Field, but that is really not a park. That's a school field for children. So I think you need to give some strong consideration to other things that should be added before you approve MDR 10 and think about the impacts. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Don, do we have anyone else?
Not.
Thank you. With that, so earlier today in the CED meeting, the current chair, because this item had been put forward by the previous composition of the CED, asked that the chair from last year introduce that. And that, I believe, was Mr. Laudenbach.
Thank you, Your Honor. Yes, it was. And Mary, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
My pleasure. Of course, Ross, thank you.
Motion to approve AB 21-008, an ordinance amending the North Bend Municipal Code to establish a new medium-density residential zone in the cottage residential zones, utilizing the CED committee recommendation and providing associated amendments to the North Bend Municipal Code as a first and final reading.
I have a second.
Second.
Mr. Garcia. I have a motion by Mr. Laudenbach, second by Mr. Garcia. I want to point out for those of you who are in the audience, that is not the motion in the packet. That is a variation on the motion. It does follow the CED's committee recommendation. Discussion. Mr. Laudenbach.
I think it was a prudent review of the Planning Commission's effort, and we are interested, at least we were in the former configuration of the CED, to see the MDR exercised in the current cottage zone without expanding it into LDR. We are not opposed to different types of housing, which are at the exact same density in cottage housing, including the MDR. And I think it's an important variety of housing styles to be allowed in those areas. And I would encourage consideration by the rest of the council in an affirmative.
Thank you. Mr. Garcia, you were the second.
I guess, no, I'm good.
Okay, thank you. I know there's been a lot of conversation around this, so let me know who's up. Mr. Elwood.
I just had a question, Your Honor. And thank you, Mike, earlier and Jesse for talking about the different grants and how those monies are supposed to be doled out. I'm curious, just quite simply, passing this before we go through form-based codes and the meatier substance of the subsequent grant, if it's, is there some other reason or some jeopardy in doing this one before that one type of thing? And it didn't occur to me during the discussion question, but that's why it just came to mind now.
I can address that a little bit. We did want to separate them because they are two different areas under discussion. The form-based code is going to deal with the downtown commercial, where this is dealing outside of that downtown commercial zone. We didn't want to confuse council by trying to bring them both at the same meeting and with changes to the code and cross-referencing them. There wasn't necessarily a particular reason this one went in front of the other than the form-based code takes more work to develop than an amendment of our cottage residential to the medium density residential.
So then a quick fast follow to that then, if we pass this, what message does that send to any sort of developers in that area? Is that something that they can start penciling things out, or do they have to wait to the form-based codes? I know you said they're separate areas, but is this one contingent upon the other being completed, or are they just completely divorced from one another?
They're completely separate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Rosen?
I'll try to keep it short. Probably won't happen. Let me just some questions here so I have a better understanding. The proposal that is in front of us is the CED recommendation. And the only changes are they remove the LDR portion, if I'm correct, and then change Stilson from 6 per acre now up to 10 per acre. Is that the only change with the CED recommendation?
Mr. McCarty?
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, so, all right, now follow-up question. If I have this wrong, please correct me, and that's why I am asking. In reading the packet, I see there's a bunch of things. Let's go to one of the bigger ones. I think it is on page 68. I see mentions of 2 different types of apartments. I take it these are rental unit type apartments. That's my general understanding of what an apartment is, not be simple. And if I'm correct on that, my next question is, how much of the zone could be apartments?
So just to clarify first, that page 68 would be within the Planning Commission recommendation. The CED version equivalent of that would be, and it's probably going to be the same language, but just so that we're looking at the CED recommendation.
That's why I asked the differences.
Yeah, page 95. So apartments are an allowed use. You can do up to 4 units within one apartment building. And the intent of that is these are small scale. The building size is limited so that it's, again, within the context of a single family neighborhood or character of a neighborhood. You could do all apartments if you're under 2 acres. Over that, you have to do a minimum of 2 different housing forms. And then there's also the diversity requirements for different elevations and so forth within that for those 2 housing forms. If you're over 3 acres, you have to do a minimum of 3 housing forms. So that might be apartments mixed with cottages, mixed with standard single family homes, or townhomes mixed with. Go ahead.
Yeah, I noticed in the definition of housing types, one is bungalow apartments and then another is small apartment buildings. Are those considered separate?
Yeah, those are different housing types.
Okay, so on a 3-acre site or whatever, you could have all apartments.
You could have
2 different types of apartments, but apartments nonetheless.
Not on a 3-acre. On a 3-acre, you need 3 housing forms.
Okay, on a 2-acre.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, thank you. And then, I got lots of questions. So I thought missing middle, we were trying to look at fee simple, different types of ownership options at different price range. We also have, and I'll address this because in the past, I think it has happened to us more times than we wish. Worst case scenarios happen. We have the possibility that this turns into an apartment zone complex as well, which maybe that is the intent and that's fine. But I do want to understand that that is definitely a possibility. And if the other question I will ask for clarifying, and then I'll make some comments later, is the CED recommendation also includes the cottage zone behind Napa as well as the cottage zone that goes along North Bend Way and Cedar Falls Way. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, because that's within the existing cottage residential zone.
Okay, just want to understand the scope of it.
Okay.
All right, those are my questions. I'll have some comments later. I know others want to speak, so I don't want to take up their time.
Mr. Rosen, I wanted to be sure regarding your questions around apartment. Were you asking if anything in this code or city code has a restriction on for rent versus for sale?
I was under the impression, I guess I thought missing middle, we were talking about like a fee simple thing. This looks like we have apartments mixed in. So that was something that I had not seen before until I read the package.
There is an owner occupancy requirement, and that's section H on page 106. So that's a minimum of, or for developments within the MDR zone that are greater than 1 acre in size, shall develop a minimum of 70% of the unit as owner occupied.
So that cancels out the bungalow apartment and small apartment buildings?
No, it's a tenure issue, not a typology. So you could have condominiums as owner occupied, whether it's fee simple lots or condominium ownership.
Yeah, so I think the confusion is the term apartment.
That's why I asked.
Yes, and I think what we were trying to get at, the term cottage apartments are really the style where there are multiple units that face, you know, a common area in the middle versus the other one that has multiple units that face the outside. They can still be in a condominium ownership form versus a rental form. It could also be that an owner owns, you know, a certain percentage and rents out some of their units that they own as well on a fee simple ownership.
Okay, so they can be rented, but that's an owner buys it and rents it out. But aside from that, up to 30% can just be pure rental, or am I misunderstanding?
No, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. As I said, I'll let others ask questions. I have some comments, but I'll wait to the end.
Thank you, Mr. Rosen. Ms. Miller, did I see your hand?
Yeah, you did. Hold on. Okay, oops, there I am.
Yep.
Everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm just going to leapfrog after Jonathan's comment about the apartments. Rentals, for example, are not necessarily easy to get and afford out here. That's one of the complaints I hear often. So that's one of my concerns when we start embracing more apartments. We also have the apartments that haven't been broken ground by exit 34, which will increase quite a bit of traffic and more people into town. So there's that, thinking forward. Also, we recently, not too long ago, had a discussion, all of us, about taking this a little slower. In other words, having one option and starting with that and seeing how well we put it together, because we want to do the right thing. We really want to take time and make the future of this town look and feel and embrace as best as we possibly can. These are very important decisions. Zoning is extremely important to really take a breath of fresh air and take a hard look at it. I'm not against saying goodbye to this grant. I know it's hard because it's a lot of work, and I certainly appreciate Planning Commission's efforts. I've been a part of that. It's such an amazing amount of time as a volunteer in researching alone. So I do want everybody to know that I really thank you all for the hard work. However, my heart, my gut is not with this completely the way it's written up. I do believe that the MDR housing is something we should be looking into. I just want to take a little bit more time to get it more comfortable and right. And I'm going to stick with that. But thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Godhill.
I guess my question is, why are we moving this so quickly? And I think Mary Miller's got a point. In the last conversation we had during work study, we talked about going slow. I thought the majority of this council was against the increase in density. I'm thoroughly surprised that we've led with increasing density way beyond what we did as a council when we talked about work study. And in light of our water and mitigation issues, I'm a little appalled that we're even talking about the density that we're talking. To me, it's not worth the $7,000 grant to get this wrong and increase density in this area. we're talking about going from someplace where we can build at 6 homes per acre to 10 homes per acre. That's a big density increase and not something I think the community really wants. The second thing is, I don't think this has been brought out to the public. Have we had any public process in this? I find it appalling we've had no public process. And I'm very concerned that our focus as administration is to increase density and not to look what's going on or what this community is asking for. And at the lights of the fact that at this point, we don't have the right to move this forward based upon infrastructure issues that we need to address. And I thought that was made perfectly clear by most of the council in the work study. So I'm pretty surprised that we're leaning forward with this, coming forward with a planning commission on something that's totally different than what we originally talked about in Work Study 1. And to find out that we need to rush it through and not go through committee, okay, and then find out it could be done in June instead of reading this the right way. The biggest reason I think most of these was done, we wanted it, was a form-based code. And we chose to go to something to increase density and increase building instead of working towards what I felt was the most important part of this, which is a forms-based code. So I see this as not ready for prime time and will not be voting for it to move forward.
So if I can clarify, if you'd like, so the cottage residential is at 10 acres dwelling units per acre. So there is no proposal to increase the density within the cottage residential zone. This MDR keeps it at the same density that that cottage residential designation has. So we did understand the council, the section in the LDR that Planning Commission reviewed to increase the base density to 6 units per acre, was a decision that Planning Commission reviewed. However, in reviewing our code, we actually allow cottage units in the LDR at a density of 8 dwelling units per acre. So there is technically no increase in capacity or in density in any of these areas. If you take into account that LDR could have developed under cottage residential at 8 dwelling units per acre. So we definitely understood what the work study was to not increase the density, and we shared that with Planning Commission. We did have public hearings, and we did notice everybody in all of the potential areas that were originally proposed for the MDR at the direction of Planning Commission. Before they even started discussing the different areas, they wanted to make sure that the public had input, which is why we did notice it to the entire area, as well as our standard publishing in our paper. So all those LDR areas and the cottage residential areas were notified of the public hearing at the Planning Commission. And we did have quite a bit of participation, specifically in the area that was removed by the Planning Commission. The property owners in that LDR area had concerns, and the Planning Commission and staff agreed, and it was removed from the proposal and the recommendation to council. I'm not sure if I missed any of your concerns, but I wanted to make sure I addressed that we did have public hearings. It did go through a public process, and this proposal, especially the CED one, does not increase density. It is separate from the form-based code. The form-based code would not cover this area. Even if we were to not move forward with the MDR, when we do move forward with the form-based code, it would be for a different zoning area. They are separate projects for separate, one specific to the downtown, and then this one would be specific to the cottage residential only.
Thank you,
Let me ask you a
Rebecca.
question, Rebecca. Based upon our code, can we build cottage beyond 6 homes per acre? Is it possible?
So the density of the cottage is 10 units. Most developers build at the maximum square footage they're allowed to. Would they build at a smaller square footage? Yes, it's possible. It's hard depending on if you're putting, how many roads, how much open space, and the setbacks, but it really depends on, a lot depends on those unit sizes of those cottage residential. And so the practicality, what we see built, is definitely not at a 10 units per acre, because they maximize the square footage, just like, we see, I've seen across everywhere with single family homes. They maximize and they build out to the max available build, because that's how they get their most money. So if we put a smaller cap on the size of cottage residential, yes, you'd get much closer to the 10 dwelling units per acre. But, I think we were very comfortable with the square footage sizes. So they're going to maximize those. And it tends to build closer to 7 dwelling units per acre when you are going to build it at the big, the biggest size cottage residential that you can.
Mr. McCarty, were you looking to?
I think Rebecca summarized what I intended to say.
Thank you. Mr. Miller, I saw you raised a hand. Were you still looking to speak?
Yes, just very briefly, I think one of the things we need to keep in mind is that this wasn't really initiated by us for density reasons. It was initiated because of the city council's concern that our housing units are very expensive and we weren't offering anything in the market that could hit lower price points so that you could cater to a different marketplace. I'm not calling it affordable housing. I'm saying these kinds of units will be cheaper than your standard single family if they're built at the same time in the market. And that's the reason that we went for this. And in fact, the grants out there, it's called a housing affordability grant. So I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we're looking to try to create a diversity of housing types that are less expensive than what we're going to get if we don't do it.
Mr. Godhelp, if you have the floor, were you done? I see other
I'll
hands.
go ahead and let Jonathan, I'll reserve some time for other comments back.
Thank you. Mr. Rosen, I saw your hand.
Yeah. First, Mary, did you have your hand up before me?
You can go forward first.
Sure.
It's
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Yeah, I'll start it with 100% opposed to this. I just don't believe this is what the community is asking for at this time. I feel that it is going to be higher density in some parts of this, no matter what it is. I just get a sense this is really not what the community is asking for. I haven't had anybody send me emails saying, hey, we'd like to see some higher density, like to see more development. I've had certainly the opposite. So I think we sharply differ on that. With that being said, there are some real concerns about the Stilson going from 4 per acre, where I believe we are today, up to 10 per acre. I don't think that's compatible at all. And the fact that I feel that this is rushed. It took us almost 10 years of tweaking with the cottage zone, trying to get something right. And I still think there's a ways to go on it. Whereas this went through in about 3+ months and gutted a lot of the cottage stuff. Some of the things taken out of there is all that open common space that I thought actually added to the ambiance of this and really was compatible with North Bend. We're trying to do things a little differently out here has always been my goal. And what I'm seeing here is, well, we'll just say it's similar to maybe Issaquah or whatever. Yeah, I absolutely don't want to see this go through. I think at a minimum, we need to table this. There's no rush. And if it costs us $3,000 in lost grant, I think that is a small price to pay to get this right. And the scale of this, I think, is just too big. Let's take a look at a small pilot project and do it on a small scale where we can make sure we've got our codes correct. And doing this from that stretch along North Bend Way and also behind Napa, that's a lot of property that we're rezoning. And as I said, I think very quickly, and I'm not really convinced that this is what the public wants. I think we need to have much better outreach. We need to have a conversation with the citizens as to what they see their city developing into. Do they want more growth? Do they want more density? And if they do, then it is our job as a council to make sure then that we develop the way they want it and we do it right. If they don't, I think we also need to take that into account and adjust our plans accordingly. But at the end of the day, it is us, we are here as representatives, and I think we need to find out where the community stands on this. I think we all have strong opinions, but I don't think any of us know for certain. So I would love to hear from the community. Let's find a way to go out, talk to the citizens, table this until that occurs, and then and only then bring this back up for consideration.
Ms. Miller, I understand your hand is up. Sorry, I didn't see it.
You know, it's okay, Mr. Mayor. Jonathan, you just, you basically said everything I pretty much wanted to say. So I'm actually gonna just say I agree wholeheartedly. I'd like to take a slower approach to this and get it right. And if it's worth losing $3,000, I'm sorry for that, but I would like to see this table for
Ms.
now.
Cullen, thank you. Ms. Cullen.
I'm not 100% opposed to it. I do think we need more housing options. I do think we're going awfully fast, and I wouldn't mind tabling it for now and coming up with a more thought out plan. And my question, I guess, is if we did go forward, do we get a say in what kind of buildings go on those lands? We get to decide if it's townhomes or bungalow apartments, and the builder doesn't just get to put in whatever they want.
We can certainly ask.
Rebecca, would you like to address that?
Yeah, that's it. So it does require, staff review. We did put in requirements to review how many can be next to each other, so that we, one of the important things that we heard originally from the work study was that you guys, although you weren't interested in increasing density, my understanding is at the time we heard that you were interested in adding additional uses, or additional housing types, excuse me. And so, that's what we tried to do, but we did want to make sure that those housing types are mixed. We didn't want to do all of this work and just have it built out at the cottage residential use that it was. So there is sections in here that discuss very specifically section, sorry, I have it noted here. Section 18.11.070 that discuss the different mixes that we would see. And we do talk about compatibility to adjacent uses and trying to get, a unique mix when we have larger development. So it is scaled based on, the size of the property, so that, if you have 1 acre or more versus 3 acre or more, there's a different number of choices, but we do leave the choice to them, but it still has to meet our design guidelines. It still has to meet all of the other requirements within the code. But it's not specific that each of these projects would come to council to approve that this could be, apartments or not. This zone would allow those types.
Ms. Miller.
Thank you, Rebecca, but we necessarily would not hear exactly what's going on, right, to the nth degree, right, as council. We would get the information aftermath. Is that correct?
That is the process when developing, correct.
Right. So we are basically kind of free falling in hopes that the developers that are interested, do the right thing. What the right thing might be may not, what we think is the right thing will probably not be the right thing, is my point. They're going to maximize what they can gain off that property and the footprint. Most likely, right?
Yes, just like we've come into the same thing with the cottage residential, correct. They're going to maximize what they can build with the footprint that we give them. So if there's a specific section or a specific use type we don't want to see, that's definitely something that we could use the direction on how you'd like, this, medium density proposal to be changed. Because, I hear that, I'm hearing from this meeting, there's concerns. I'm hearing no increase in density, which definitely, the cottage residential doesn't increase the density for the majority of the areas. And we did try and go very specifically to ensure a mix so that we didn't get just all courtyard apartments, in an acre development. But that maybe, this infill or that infill might have a cottage between, a duplex or next to a triplex, and so we tried to make sure that we got a mix so that we just didn't get the same thing over and over again. So, we're happy to take additional direction on a specific area of this code that you'd like us to look at more closely to ensure that the direction to the developers would be what you guys were looking at, or requirement to the developers or what you're looking at.
Can I backtrack in time just a little few years ago? In creating the cottages, there was an awful lot of years of conversation about how to dial that in. And in the end result, we got what we got. And I'm please bear in mind that the people that live there, I hope they're happy and love it. That's as it should be. But the outside looking in, I was completely and utterly, I was blown away by the end result, because it was not what we were talking about. So somehow in the writing, it's all in the writing. It's all in these very important words that we use. It is all there. So we need to take time. This is, again, my opinion, to get this thing darn right. This is the future for this town. This is part of the future. And it's important also to note that MDR, I really do want to see some really good looking spaces, a mix, not to see a sameness at all. And we need that, but I really am going to reiterate again, just to take some time with this.
And so if I can ask, sorry, if I can ask again, is that specific to the architectural that was built, or specific to the bulk and dimensionals that was built? Is it the setbacks too little, too much, or architectural? That way I know what to concentrate on.
Right. It's a combination for me.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Mr. Elwood, I saw your hand, and then I think I saw Mr. Rosen. Mr. Elwood.
Thank you. First comment, maybe two, and then a question. Rebecca, thank you for your thoughtful responses and being crystal clear that you heard us in the work study. That's incredibly important. So thank you for being articulate in that recollection and following through with that. The other comment is, I too am not opposed to this. I've been a long-standing advocate of having a diversified inventory, not only from an aesthetic standpoint, but also from a financial standpoint. And that's where this kind of beacon of hope came alive with this missing middle concept that we were presented with just a couple months ago. Now, my question is, are there any developers, or is there any builder or anything like that, anybody like that, any business like that in queue that you think or is already asking for this kind of opportunity? Or do you have a sense that once this, say, passes, let's say it passes, that there's going to be a lineup for this? So what sort of pressure or interest are you gauging on the city side that this should pass now because the opportunity is there with these builders?
I can, turn it over to Mike a little bit about discussions if we've had any calls. You usually, in my many years of working as a planner, usually what you get is developers looking at the code, figuring out what they can do, and deciding whether it's worth buying. Very rarely do I get developers that go, we want to do something completely different than what your code says. What can you do for us? It's usually they want the known. They don't want to buy a property and prepare to develop it if they don't know that they can develop what they're interested in developing. So it's usually a chicken and an egg situation with what you're saying is they if there's a property for sale, they take a look at the zone, what's allowed, and they make a decision. So until you have the code with what you're looking for, they don't look into that. You do see changes more in a commercial aspect when people call and want to do something different, but less so I see in a residential. One of the things that I was looking at with these mixes and listening to Council Member Miller, one of the things we could do, for bigger areas, if there's a concern with, a bigger development not looking like you want, we could, if someone wanted to develop differently than even this code, we could add another section on a mix of types that would allow almost a sub area plan. So for projects more than 5 acres or more than 10 acres, we could add a section that would allow for a sub area plan to be approved through a public process at the Planning Commission and Council. Then you would kind of see what they're proposing, the mix they're proposing, and something like that. But you know, we wouldn't want to necessarily require that for all developments. You know, if someone just wants to build the duplex on their infill property, you know, versus something that was a 5-acre or 10-acre project. So, you know, it's definitely hard to say that, yes, no, we don't have developers knocking down our door asking to develop missing middle. Most developers want to develop and build, like you said, properties as big as they can so they can make the most money as they can. So until we regulate it and require that missing middle, they're not going to generally develop it if we don't require it.
Mike, did you need to add anything clarifying?
I wanted to
Rebecca's
also
statement?
add that all of this has to be put in the context of concurrency, which is that test of available services. And without the wastewater treatment plant capacity, until and unless those improvements at the plant are made, nothing can happen, regardless of whether it's under the existing cottage residential zone or under the new medium density residential zone. So there's not a rush in terms of let's address some interest of a developer. We have to wait for those treatment plant improvements for anything to happen. And just one other thought on the diversity is we added those provisions about the mix of typologies for over 1 acre and over 3 acres. But as developments occur, you'll naturally see diversity as you move down that cottage residential or medium density residential zone area. As small developments occur, it's going to add interest because somebody's going to want to do it, you know, 3/4 of an acre of cottages. Somebody's going to want to do 3/4 of an acre of apartments as different developments occur. So you're going to naturally see more diversity than what you would see under the existing cottage residential zone, which requires cottages. So it builds in more diversity by allowing more housing types.
Okay. Mr. Miller, did you need to clarify?
Yeah, just last comment. We've had the cottage zone in place for a couple of years. We've had no interest other than one guy who came and went. And we don't have a big demand for that right now. And we thought that when we presented to you in the work study, that the typologies that are in this ordinance were something that you were interested in, that this missing middle is something you're interested in. And if we don't have any, if we have a lack of interest in the cottage and there's something that you think, and my impression from your work study was that council thought that if you could get the mix of these missing middle units, it would be much more in character with the community than just subdivision after subdivision of single family homes, because we're doing a lot of that and that doesn't give you a lot of diversity. So one of the things we heard from you is bring us something that will have uniqueness and interest. And so that's part of our motivation here.
Mr. Elwood, you still had the floor and I saw Mr. Rosen's hand.
Thank you. I appreciate that additional context, Dave. I think, you know, just speaking off the cuff, even for my own self, just what I'm sensing and what I'm feeling, I feel the pace of this is what's spooky. Somebody, one of my colleagues mentioned earlier, the cottage zoning, worked on it for 10 years. The end result, and I agree with Ms. Miller's point, I hope those people that live there are happy. My take, essentially, it looked exactly like what we were trying to avoid, to be honest. We also have other issues with, you know, North Bend Way. There's property along the Torguson, folks there maybe thinking commercial, something like those. So these are all things that we're considering. But I think the mix, the diversity of stock, the various inventory. I think you heard us. I mean, so I agree with that. So I appreciate that. I think it's just the speed in which this is unfolding. Phoenix Plaza would be another example. There are things that we recall that were supposed to be put in motion that didn't happen. And one of the things that I have from my apprehension is I like what I'm seeing. I love the reinforcement that I'm hearing that we're not creating more, that we're getting the diversity of stock that we need, both financially for folks that live here as well as aesthetics. But I also know that we've made mistakes before in the past, so I'm a bit gun shy, especially with something that moves this fast. And I respect the fact that form-based codes are a separate entity, but I can't help but to think that when we pull the lens back and we start looking at our community as a whole, some of those how things are integrated and overlapping could be of value. When we look at just a microcosm of our community and say, we're going to fix this one spot, and we start doing that, and we've even talked about this in other retreat moments where, yeah, we're just focused on this little neighborhood here or this zoning area here. And so we make a bunch of decisions, but we fail to look at the impact of the community as a whole. And so what I'm sensing is more of a slow roll process, soak on it, make sure it's the right decision, because once we commit to it, we're putting things in motions that could come back and have come back to bite us in the ass later. So don't think that, at least from my point of view, I can't speak for my colleagues, that we're thinking that you're going off on a wild tangent and this is all irrelevant, because we have been saying we want some diversity of stock. We have been encouraging that creativity from staff. I've been advocating it. I've heard my other colleagues advocate for it. So please don't take it as a shooting you down, so to speak. It's just more of a, let's take a breath for a moment. I mean, we have water mitigation to consider as well. I mean, that's another big factor. And thank you for talking about concurrency, Mike. That's a huge relevant point. So when you take the lens back, and I know I say that a lot, pull the lens back and we look at the holistic point of view, I think that's maybe what we're needing. Just 2 cents there.
Thank you. So what I was hearing basically so far is that we'd like to get more public involvement, more noticing, more advertising out there to see, what the community is looking for, not necessarily any concerns on the specific housing types. We did, one of the reasons I want to say that staff, we did look at a holistic, one of the big planning, ideas is making sure that you have transitions and changes. So the fact that the cottage residential and the LDRs that we were looking at were around our mixed use, our downtown, usually when you want to put these higher mix of types that are already a higher density, like the cottage residential, you want to make sure that they're as close to your commercial, to your amenities and those kinds of things. So we definitely are obviously not ignoring the citywide idea. We're not picking an area way off in the corner. The reason we considered cottage residential was because of its location to where the form-based code would be and to the downtown.
So in a moment, I want to do a process check with the council as a whole. I believe I saw Mr. Rosen hand up earlier. I see Mr. Garcia. Mr. Rosen, was that correct?
Yeah, really quick. First of all, I'd like to commend Mr. Elwood, first person I think I've ever heard use the word speed and Phoenix Plaza in the same sentence. That has been a very slow process, so well done. I would like, Mr. Miller, you mentioned, that cottages, nothing had been built and that there was no demand from developers for that. I would take the position that it's also okay not to develop everything. I'm okay if we don't develop that whole area and leave some single family residential right now. There's no rush to develop it. And I think especially when we consider that we have issues with water and sewer for the time being anyway. I'm not so inclined to try to find the ideal development for every inch of the community. It's all right to leave some of it single family residential. In time, things will develop as we grow, it always does. But it's all right to leave it alone for now, I think, with our restrictions we have. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia.
Well, I guess I got a few things to say. I'm going to have to, I hate to admit it. I might have been inspired by one of Mr. Elwood's comments, which is always just hard to comprehend. I guess my question would be, is if we waited to do this for the form-based code, could we then get some of the certainty that we're looking for, because the development would be based on the form-based code? So that's my question number one. Who wants to answer that one? Jesse?
So are you asking us to expand the draft form-based codes to include cottage residential? Well, or are you just wanting to see the form-based codes before you consider the medium density residential?
Well, so my understanding on this form-based code, and this is, well, look, my understanding is this form-based code is going to go all up and down North Bend Way from the truck stop through downtown. Is that not correct?
That is, so as I mentioned, right now, the current draft of the form-based code is proposed just to be our downtown commercial. It is not running the entire North Bend Way. That expansion of a future expansion of a form-based code was discussed as part of the work study at the time that we review and approve a complete streets program. It's very hard to do a form-based code like that without first discussing what we want the complete streets to look like, what we want that areas, the different areas along North Bend Way to look at. So this is the proposed form-based code that's coming forward to Planning Commission is only the downtown commercial zone, only the red zone. If you look at the agenda map, I can try and find the page, the map that shows the medium density residential, you can see that downtown commercial. So the form base is not as big, I think, as we eventually want to get to. We are just, until we complete the complete streets. Then we would look at expanding for the form based along the entire North Bend at a later time.
Conservative first step. Mr. Garcia, you still got the floor. You had another question?
I guess I got a comment. I guess a couple clarifying things. I want to make sure everybody understands that the Stilson Road part of this is just between North Bend Way and Cedar Falls Way. It's just that little section of road. It's probably this big on the map, so that's only like half a house, right? I'm hearing a general consensus to slow down. If that's the general consensus, I'll support that. I think one thing I do want to throw out, and I differ a little bit on the cottage zone in that I don't think some of them look horrible. I think for me, the disappointment on that was missing the price point. But what I do want to echo is we have new leadership in the planning department that we need to give a chance to get this right. Now, I'm not saying that doesn't mean slow down if that's what people need to slow down, but I feel like we got to kind of let go of the cottage residential debacle because that was 10 years ago. We've got some new faces. We need to be diligent and make sure that what we're getting is what we're getting, but we can't tie them to the cottage houses. And that's all I'm going to say. If the motion is to somebody makes the motion to slow this down or table it or whatever, and we lose the $3,000, fine. I want people to be comfortable with this. I generally support the notion of the missing middle. Again, we are years away from having the general facilities and the concurrency to do this. I just feel like we have the time to make this right, but I also want to be open-minded to new voices and learn from our mistakes of the past and be diligent. And I'm not suggesting that we just let our guard down and say, oh, hey, it's a free-for-all at this zone. I also want everybody to remember too that there's single family houses in this, and just because we rezone it does not mean that they're going to build to the maximum capacity of this. So I think when we all feel that it's the right thing to do, it will not just become a huge wave of townhomes overnight. I mean, unfortunately, it might get there, but we need the diversity. I do want to throw out the question of the parks because I do think that that's a little bit of an issue that was raised by public comment. Is if we're going to have, I think it's 6 acres of this. Is that correct? Somebody verify that 6 acres. Was that the number we came up with at CED? Was this zone was 6 acres?
the zone is substantially larger than 6 acres.
Oh,
I think maybe, well, let me ask though, for clarification there, Mike. I would agree. I think the two cottage residential zones together would be substantially larger than 6 acres.
how many?
I think part of the clarification was what's unbuilt, because both of those zones already contain large cottage developments. One, I think, would be about half of the available acres. So there's a difference, as you're speaking to Mr. Garcia, between what likely would be built and what theoretically could be built.
Yeah, so moving forward in whatever fashion that is, let's get that number out to everybody too, of what is the, you know, if the cottage zone, let's not count the cottages that are already there, because they're already there, right? They're not gonna be rebuilding those. So let's get an idea as we move forward. How many units are we talking about? And I think at that point in time, I'm going to support whatever the will of the majority of the council is. I do like the idea of a housing availability that's not $900,000.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Godhelp, I see your hand. I'll ask you to indulge me for a moment here. I wanted to just do a check with council. I've been trying to track kind of the tenor of where things are going. I've heard at least 2 members opposed, period, in any form, at least in the way it's presented to you tonight. I've heard various combinations of potentially supporting just tabling action tonight till a point in the future. And then, of course, there's been some support for passage in the way the motion was introduced. I was going to suggest possibly going back to Mr. Loudenbach, the motion maker, to see if he wants to make a suggestion for how to move forward. If that's inconsistent with what you wanted to say, then I will give you the floor first. Mr. Godhelp.
Yeah, no, I would like to go back to Ross and let him decide what he wants to do. But one of the comments I just wanted to add is something Rebecca said, which I think would make us, you know, we talked about form-based code. That basically gives us an idea of what that street should look like and how we want it to look when it's said and done. So kind of part of me is thinking, when you say that, is that putting the cart before the horse? Should we be getting the street standards? Should we be making sure we have a vision of what we want that corridor to look at before we start stacking in, you know, changes? And again, I agree with everybody else. You know, the cottage homes they're built. I'm sure they like them. It was just not the design we wanted. It came again for the same thing as low cost and, you know, affordable housing, and it didn't turn out that way. And I have a gut feeling where we're going with this, we're not going to get affordable, but I do want to make sure that it looks aesthetically pleasing and right. And if we had the form-based codes first and understood what that landscape was look at, I think it'd be much easier to get a vision. And one of the things during the work study we did talk about is trying to get some sort of mock-up of what it could look like so that we don't go down the same avenue when the cottage. And we also talked about piloting it in a smaller location so we knew what we were trying to get out, we actually got, which was a big mistake we got with the cottage.
Thank you. You all know I've got lots. Mr. Elwood, is this different than where I want to go to Mr. Loudenbach?
No, I just need to clarify my statement for the people that live in the cottage homes. I don't think their homes are ugly. I think they're beautiful homes. What I'm saying is what I thought we were getting as cottages were not the cottages that I thought we were getting. So let me just clarify. They're beautiful homes. I hope they're happy. It's just not. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's try and get a sense of where we are. So Mr. Loudenbach, you've been patient and quiet through the dialogue. You made the motion. Where would you like to go?
Home.
You are
no,
home.
I am home. I am
You
home.
are home.
You know, I think it was a good discussion. Everybody has, you know, their viewpoint, which are, you know, certainly entitled to and valid. My intent on bringing this forward from as the previous chair of the CED was to offer the medium density zoning in a limited scope, understanding that we don't have the concurrency, we don't currently have the capacity, but it gives planning and planners an opportunity to define and hone in on an acceptable mix based on the parameters that are in the bill or in the motion. If you're not willing to support that, that's fine. I don't care about the $3,000 grant. I think what we need to do is be very clear about the intent that if we want housing stock diversity, we're going to have to introduce it into the code in some form at some point. And if not now, later, if not now, when? We're going to, I don't particularly think this was rushed. We did have a work study. We did have public input. But if this is not acceptable to the majority, I'm willing to withdraw the motion. It's just unfortunate that we are at this point right now. I think we're going to be facing similar challenges as soon as the legislative session ends in Olympia, because right now, whether you're aware of it or not, there are certain forces at work that are out to remove our local control of our zoning jurisdictions and mandate multifamily housing be placed into all LDR zones and remove our ability to address that. Also, there's a move afoot to remove HOAs and any sort of constrictive covenants from a local zoning perspective. So we're in for an interesting ride, folks. If you want me to withdraw the motion, I'm perfectly happy to do that. And we can go from there, see where it goes. If you want me to table the motion to a date certain, I would be happy to entertain that as well. If you have a date certain that would make you happy. I'm listening.
Thank you, Mr. Laudenbach. Okay, there we have it. So let's have some feedback. What do you want to do? Mr. Rosen.
Yeah, I'm fine with just withdrawing it for now and let us as a council think this through and come up with a plan that works, that we're all comfortable with, but let's not put ourselves under a strict deadline to get it done. Let's work our way through it with some.
So if it's not a table to a date certain, then we'll just withdraw the motion and look to reintroduce at a later date.
That's where I'm at. Yes, sir.
Ms. Miller, did you have your hand up?
Yep, I'll second that.
Okay.
Your Honor, I would withdraw the motion.
Wait. Oh, okay. I thought we were harvesting feedback here.
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was all done. I didn't see it.
No.
You're on a different gallery page. I didn't see you waving your hand there.
I've got multiple hands waving. Mr. Laudenbach, did you want to belay your withdrawal of the motion?
Well, if you guys want to weigh in some more, I got all night.
Okay, Mr. Elwood, and then Ms. Colin.
I respect the idea of withdrawing it. I feel a little bit more inclined to do a date certain though. And my silence here was I was trying to look for the next meeting lines up and I don't have that, but I'm not a hard way or another. I'm just leaning more to coming up with a date certain if some other colleagues feel that. If not, I'm supportive of withdrawing it for now and bringing it back at a later date. But I agree with your points, Ross.
Sorry.
You spoke wisdom about giving some direction to the staff, so I like that.
Thank you, Mr. Elwood. Ms. Colin?
I like the idea of a date certain as well, because I think if we table it, it could end up tabled forever and we won't get back to it. I think this is something that we can talk about at our retreat thing next week and try to figure out a little bit better what everybody is thinking.
That's a no on the retreat.
Okay.
Don't try to hijack my agenda, Colin. Stay in your lane. Be there for 6
Okay,
hours if we do that.
So before we move, I want the parliamentary, I just want to make sure the ground we're on here in regard to versus, I know where we go if we move to table to a date certain. If the proposer of the motion withdraws and there is no further motion, what is the effect of this agenda bill? Is it dead?
No, it just goes away.
It effectively goes to the parking lot. You can bring it back onto your agenda in the normal course of putting matters on the agenda.
Thank you. I just wanted to be sure that that was correct. Mr. Garcia, did you have, I'm sorry, Alan?
Can I make a suggestion? If we can't get a date to the future, why don't we get through the work study and not hijacking, but maybe, you know, some sort of polling during, after, so that we understand what our work structure is going forward based upon what we come out of work study, so we can put it in a place that it doesn't, you know, overtax the staff and doesn't overtax the council.
Mr. Garcia?
Can I remand it back to committee? Can I make that motion? Does that do anything?
I think effectively no different. Mr. Laudenbach?
I think the prudent thing to do at this point is to retract the motion, and we can bring it back at the discretion of the council when they felt there has been adequate input and adequate outreach for the community. And
right, so
we can bring it back at that point. And to be honest with you, since the date has been extended to June, might not lose the bucks.
All right.
So I'm going to withdraw my motion.
All right, that's confirming that the motion has been withdrawn. I believe parliamentary procedure wise, it does negate the second. It doesn't need to be second. The motion maker withdrew it. There is no motion on the table. So the question is there any further motion by any member regarding the agenda bill before you? And if there is none, we will just move on. Okay, seeing none. Thank you. Appreciate all of the input. We will move on. Mayor, council, and administrator concerns and initiatives. Let's see here, Mr. Godhelf.
Wish you would know. Still trying to figure out what I was going to say.
Uh-huh.
First off, I hope everybody had a happy new year, and that we partake into a safe 2021. Tomorrow we will see hopefully a safe transition of power, which I hope for, which is the cornerstone of our democracy. So I want everybody to be careful out there. As we know, COVID is still rampant. There's some new strains coming out that make it more easy to get it. So please mask up. Stay tuned. We're working very hard. I know he said Fire and Rescue, like I said, is working very hard on trying to find some other avenues to be able to deliver the vaccines that we can get to our community. So stay tuned. I think that's an important thing. I thank the community and my council members who I think are very supportive of this getting done. And it probably will take, we'll have to talk about it. We'll take some funds into the future. So we'll talk about that in the future. But with that, please stay safe and look forward to seeing you the next time.
Thank you, Ms. Miller.
I'll be short and brief, and it's all about safety, and everybody, please be careful out there. Our COVID numbers, and today was over 400,000 across the nation. And in many places, there were prayers and songs and remembrances made. And I want it to be known that I feel for all those that are grieving and suffering throughout this really immense tragedy. And I like all of us, can't wait for this to be in our rearview mirror. So please stay healthy, safe, and take care of yourselves and each other.
Thank you. Ms. Cullen.
So the vaccines are out. They're making progress. When it's your turn, please don't hesitate to sign up and get your doses. It's not that bad. I did it. It's okay. And I actually gave me a huge sense of relief, and it took the weight off the shoulders of all my colleagues. So I think it will do the same for all of the community. And vaccines are good. Yay, science.
Thank you. Mr. Loudenbeck.
How do you compete with yay science? Holy mackerel. I tell you. Well, thanks everybody for the robust discussion this evening. We're up for a whole bunch more as we move into 2021. It's an exciting time. We have a lot of things going on, and I really appreciate everybody's attention and input. And we're looking forward to having some successes in the near future. And take care of yourselves. We'll hopefully see you in person soon. And with the benefit of those COVID vaccinations that Heather's going to be Heather, are you going to be packing vaccine yourself and just kind of run into us and randomly stick us on the street, or what's the deal?
I would love to.
Yeah, I had a feeling you might like to poke us with a sharp object every once in a while. But anybody, I just wanted to say have a safe and happy January here for what's left of it, and we'll see you all in February. Take care.
Thank you. Mr. Rosen.
Yeah, I'll keep it short since I rambled on a lot tonight. Thank you for indulging me, Council. I do want to just draw some attention to something I'd like us to consider, which is some sort of outreach, maybe over the next couple of months, to the public at large, and get some input on growth to help guide us in our discussions in the future so that we can better, I think we can make better decisions if we have some of that feedback. I certainly need it, and I would love to hear from the public. So I'll ask again that we look at that in the near future. Thank you, guys. Appreciate everything tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Elwood.
Thank you. I'll echo a lot of folks' sentiments, and ditto Mr. Rosen's doing some sort of community touch base survey, something. I think we need that. I would like to commend Rebecca tonight. I think this is the first night that you really had to demonstrate some chops with us. It was kind of a sticky, potentially combative moment, but I think because of your demeanor and your professionalism, it kept everybody level-headed. So kudos to you and surviving round one. Other than that, I hope all stay safe and live long and prosper.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem
They'll turn on you
Garcia.
soon enough, Rebecca.
Pipe down, Kenyon. Pipe down. Again, everybody, please stay safe. I know personally, for me and my family, getting some sun the last couple of days, and I don't know if anybody else has noticed, it's like 5:15 before it's pitch black out now. So it's gonna get better before long, folks. Please stay diligent. I feel like just like when I was 19, if anybody makes fake IDs, I'd like to be 65 pretty quick here. Reach out to me, let me know. It used to be about $25. I have that. So, hit me up if you make fake IDs that could get me in the vaccine line faster. In all seriousness, just honestly, just hope people are well and continue to be well. And thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. I think you're going to have to lose more hair to qualify to get into my age category. Mr. Miller, speaking.
Yes, one thing that we're working on that I want to make the council aware of, and Alan's aware of it. I've been working with both the tribes and Chief Jeff Clark over at Eastside Fire and Rescue. They both are getting doses of vaccinations to be able to distribute, or in the process of trying to do that. And we're trying to coordinate an effort so that we could have one point in the valley here where people could come and get inoculated. And so I'm trying to coordinate with them and maybe see if we could marshal our resources rather than having them going out to different folks, and have a central location here in North Bend where we could help get these vaccines out quickly. So we're going to be having a meeting next week to coordinate that. I think the real problem is the delivery of the vaccines and keeping them cold and having the kind of facilities to keep them, healthy and active so that they can be administered. But we're working on that, and I think that's a real strong priority that we need to get with and get it distributed. We're hearing a lot about it, but we're not seeing a lot of action. There are certain locations in the county where the county is distributing to, but it's really in the heavy populated areas, not in the valley here. So we're trying to get some focus on that between the influence of the fire department and the Snoqualmie tribe. We'll be working with them to try to set something up, and we'll get the word out to you as things develop. And I thank Rebecca for her good work and all of the planners for their hard work on this subject. And I think the most important thing in going forward will be to elicit some degree of unanimity in direction from the council so that what we're putting together is what they want. And we, we're not all going to get 100% of what we want, but we want to do what you all want, but it's got to be communicated well to us so that we can get through the process and be happy with what we have. Thank you, Your Honor.
Dave, thank you for, I was remiss by adding the tribe. So thank you about adding the tribe. They are very much involved and they have been a great partner to us throughout.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Before I make a few other comments that I already intended regarding public feedback, direct to Mr. Rosen's question, that has already been in conversation for some time at the executive staff level on how exactly to do that. It's a goal of mine for this year. In the past, we've held what we call town halls, and that is somewhat the working concept. But of course, with COVID and the restrictions, we're looking at what kind of hurdles and barriers we might have in that regard, and how that might be complemented by a broad survey as well. So we are indeed looking into that. The pro tem and I have had a short conversation around that. So thank you for bringing it up. Yes, totally with you on that, in a very wide community sense. Beyond that, Washington State Department of Health announced yesterday that it is moving into COVID-19 vaccine phase 1B Tier 1. I hope somebody out there knows what the heck that means. But at minimum, it is intended to expand vaccine access to more people per week. The state has also reduced the 70 and older phase 1B vaccine age to restriction to 65 and older, which aligns with the federal government announcement last week. To find out more about Washington State's COVID-19 vaccine plan, please visit the news section of the city's website. And I'm sure I don't need to echo any more than council's already shared. Please continue to be safe. Please wear your mask. Please keep distance. We've had quite a surge here in the last few weeks. We want to knock that number back down and ensure that we all stay healthy. Next, North Bend Way will continue to be closed through early next week during the hours of 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. due to overnight utility work being performed by Puget Sound Energy. The closure will occur between the North Bend Motel and QFC, and a detour will be in place for those traveling in the area. Sideview Metropolitan Park District's work on Torguson Skatepark project is close to completion. When completed, the improvements will feature expansion of the skate park with additional pathways, stairs, and landscaping. Until then, the park does remain fenced off and closed to the public. This for any member of the public who might be a teenager or use skate parks or the parent of a teenager. I personally saw at least 20 people inside the construction fence in a partially built skate park. Dangerous, problematic. Please be respectful. Northwest Railway Museum has announced Scenic Winter. Socially distanced train rides will take place during the months of January through March. This is the first time in the museum's history that visitors can take the historic railway excursion along the museum's 5.5 miles of track during the winter months. The schedule includes departures from downtown North Bend, which gives riders the opportunity to visit local shops and enjoy other downtown amenities. For more information about the winter train schedule, it is available at www.trainmuseum.org. And with that, I will conclude my comments for this evening. Thank you very much for all of your time tonight. Can I entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion.
I move to adjourn.
I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I think that was not an opposed, that was an aye to adjourn. We are
Nobody call me
unanimous
tomorrow.
and we are unanimous. We are adjourned. Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night.